Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the NRG Championship Series in Lansing, Michigan. I am Mason Clark, and my co-host Corbin Hostler, and today Corbin and I are covering some standard action. We're in round 4, and we want to give you a little update on the NRG leaderboard. So let's take a check in on that before we get to our feature match area. All the names in orange are locked for our end of the year championship event. 5 digits in prize support, invite to the Pro Tour. A lot going on there, along with free invites to all of next year's events as well. You can see those names, but let's look at a couple of the names that are just a little short. Our top 4 finishing players will be invited back to the end of the year. So if we go back to that slide really quickly here, Wesley Hickman, Aiden Cates, Charlie Dunsberg, and Will Kowalczyk, who is in our feature match area this round, are all players who, if we were to end right now, they would be the players who would make it to the end of the year event. Every single one of our events, no matter whether you get last place or first place, you get some number of points. The better you do, the more points you get. We love to reward consistent results here on the NRG series. So come on out and join us for some of those future events. Let's look at our players to watch today, though, as we have a lot of them. As we just mentioned, Will at the top of the leaderboard here at 3-0 for our players. Almost everyone else is 2-1 except for Alden, who was 0-2. So all our players getting a win that round to move up to 2-1. But let's head to our feature match area as our main feature is about to be underway. These players are shuffling up very quickly here as Jake Conan on the right with Is It Prowess and Sibby Pugsley on the left here with Azorius Control.
Yeah, we've actually got to watch quite a bit of Azorius Control today. It's been very good. And while we did get to watch Is It Prowess earlier, we didn't get to watch it do much. So nice to see Jake Conan on it here. Going to be a good match back and forth. I think this is probably one of those matchups that's going to become a staple of the standard format. So if you are someone at home who is interested in getting out to one of these events in the future, playing for the money, remember it's a 10K. These players are in here at their 3-0 and 2-0-1 records. This is a matchup you're going to want to know. And these players are quite practiced at it. So I think we're probably in for a bit of a treat here as we watch this new standard format find its legs and these players sort of develop what it's going to be. And here we go. So Seam Rip, 1 drop, takes out the token from the talent, though it does leave the talent behind. And then Jake just passes here on turn 2.
Oh, this is brutal. This is a turn where Jake would love to have gotten something on the board and just use the mana while Sibby is tapped out. That would have been a great spot there. A little bit unfortunate. It does make me think there's a lot of strong 3 mana cards in hand, though, because if Jake kept this hand, I do believe it's a 7-card hand. And maybe I'm miscounting there with the cards. We didn't get to exactly see the mulligan process fully. But, you have to assume there's some action going on as Stockup's going to make sure Sibby has action for the rest of this game.
Well, I was going to say, yeah, Jake is going to get a chance to resolve whatever 3 mana card he wants here. So that's, I don't know what exactly to make of that. Now, maybe Sibby is just needed to find a land. I do spot a Fountain Port there. But that didn't, so maybe not, we don't know exactly what the motivation there was besides just, hey, Stockup's the most powerful card. Maybe I should just play it. It's fine to put the shields down for a moment. And I guess you're not really punished here, right? Because Jake taps out for the Vivi. But all right, surely with your just freshly stocked up hand in your Azorius Control deck, you can figure out how to answer this. So there we go. We start with the removal or just the bounce. Yeah. Or the removal on the, that's a get lost. So that will create the tokens behind. There we go.
Yeah, and so from Jake's perspective and for the viewers at home, like a good learning moment here is there's something missing about Sibby's hand. That's why we're stock upping, right? Because Sibby would like to, in theory, interact. Maybe it's lands, maybe it's action. We don't really know. And over the next couple of turns, Jake's going to be paying attention to what Sibby is doing. Sees, for example, here, the stock up resolve, right? Maybe a sign there wasn't much interaction because a card like No More Lies there would have been a premium answer to Jake's stock up here. Just such a good way for Jake to stay in this game here. So that's sort of the first clue. You don't need to have the perfect solve instantly when your opponent gives it this clue. You can be a little bit like Sherlock Holmes, like a detective here, Corbin. You can start to solve the puzzle slowly and then get a read, and then maybe make a play off that information here. Speaking of that information, this is a pretty good sign that Sibby doesn't have a bunch of answer spells because here comes Archangel Elspeth onto the battlefield, which we have seen so much today and has been so impressive. I'm fighting the urge to go get my own Archangel Elspeth here from the NRG store.
Well, that's what I was going to say is that we've all day long seen players when faced with the choice to keep mana open or just tap out for Elspeth, they just tap out for Elspeth every time. It just appears that it is that kind of card, right? I remember some old standard days when I got in there. He goes, check out the Elspeth Storm Slayer on the battlefield there with all of its many abilities, all of which we've seen used today. I remember when players would just tap out for Gideon, and if you untapped with Gideon, the game was probably over. And Elspeth kind of feels the same way in these blue-white decks.
Yeah, she is so good at just being something that closes the door quickly, but also can stabilize, right? We've seen this -3 be very good in some of these matchups where our opponent plays one thing that's kind of, big and starting to do a little bit here, and then our Elspeth Storm Slayer just answers it immediately. As we are going to torch the tower, bargaining away that map token. You have to think something else is coming down here as well for Jake if we're doing that.
Yeah, Jake is starting to get rolling a little bit here with, right, we're up to 2 counters on the Vivi. So the triggers are coming. Sibby's still at a pretty healthy life total here, but it is starting to the snowball roll. All right, so what does Jake want to follow up with here? I believe that it's thinking about if we have any follow-up plays. We've got Sibby completely tapped out, and we're going to go with an opt. That's another trigger, another counter on the Vivi, another ping to Sibby's life total.
And you're seeing here a bit of what players like about the Is It Prowess deck compared to the Cauldron deck. Because I think for some players, it's kind of like, well, why, if I'm going to have the VV cards, if I'm willing to, get the Cauldrons, why would I play this instead? This is one of the big advantages. You get cards like Opt, like Sleight of Hand, that help smooth your draw, and you can kind of burst off with your VVs a little bit. Yes, you don't have these insane 20, 30 mana turns that, the Cauldron deck has all the time. But a good way to think about it is Cauldron sometimes goes 0 to 70 immediately, right? Because that huge burst of speeds and everything works. And sometimes it fails, like we've seen in the future match area so far today. Where the Is It Prowess deck is kind of going 0 to 40. It's not going as fast, but it's a lot more consistent at doing that. And so that's what some of the players are really valuing, especially with the artist
format evolves, right? Everyone who's not playing that becomes better at stopping you from going from 0 to 70. It becomes a lot more valuable to just be able to cruise along there at a nice, safe speed. But there you go. Vivi does finally hit the dust. It gets lost, but a whole lot of value generated for Jake in the process. That said, Sibby gets in with the tokens, I guess. The board, you're still at 16. Your life total is at a reasonable spot. You're still making land drops. And now you get the talent out of the way, so Jake can't even activate that. Really trying to drown him out on resources, even if Sibby doesn't necessarily have a way to, have full control or close things out right now. So, all right, another talent from Jake to start the turn off.
This is huge. I was actually going to say that talent in play was massive because we got to level it up and get stock up here. Having the next one is, obviously you'd rather have your first one around, but still you get the stock up back in hand. Into the Floodmaw is a card that a lot of the Is It Prowess decks are moving up to 4 of now, which means that Seam Rip is going to get bounced to hand eventually, and we'll just level up the talent again when that time comes. So this is a lot of value here from Jake, and this is part of the thing too. Like, these Is It decks are very good at just playing Magic, right? And they just sort of engage with a normal game and can go long. And you're seeing Sibby here finally starts to find some of the things that you expect from a control deck, like 3 steps ahead in hand. But Jake has, a little bit of pressure on the board to make it a little awkward.
Yeah, another land drop there for Sibby's good. The fact that it's a Fountain Port is also good. But again, hey, keep up mana. Just 2 of it, going for Elspeth again. So Elspeth hits the battlefield. That's going to make some more tokens. And representing No More Lies, at least in hand for Sibby at this point. But if you're Jake, I guess that we're going to probably end up putting that to the test because you're going to need to do something to get back onto the board here.
Yeah, this is one of those moments where it's like, I'm going to represent No More Lies because I get to, and my opponent's going to play into it, but maybe they do something a little weird beforehand to try to min-max, if I do have it, something resolves. But stock up here is sort of the best thing to start with in these spots. Also plays around the No More Lies, so sort of a free roll. Looks like stock up hit stock up plus a couple other cards there. Jake's going to try and figure out exactly what we want from this point.
Yeah, Jake's life total is healthy as well, right? He's at 18, but against 4 tokens in play already and Elspeth in play, you don't have all the time in the world to stock up and to stock up and to stock up. You are going to have to impact the board sooner rather than later. So I guess we'll see what the follow-up is from Jake. I know we also had another cantrip in hand as well. So a lot of air, as they might say, right now for Jake when he really needs cards that can actually impact and catch him up.
Yep. And we talked about the strength of this prowess deck, because you have those cards that kind of put your draw together. Also, sometimes you hit spots like this where you need to rebuild, and you do have the ability to, but it takes time.
Yeah.
And it looks like Sibby's going to block right away. Probably a sign we're going to see Sibby just keep plussing the Elspeth for a couple turns. We could have seen Sibby maybe let the Elspeth get hit, risk a torch to the tower. Pretty high risk, but would have been a potentially high payoff play as well. But playing it safe, I have this big Elspeth, and here's End of the Flood Maw. This card's so punishing on cards.
Is this an upkeep into the Flood Maw?
It is, yeah, because it looks like Jake wanted to use Sibby's mana if we were going to have No More Lies, but has walked in to 3 steps ahead. Sibby's going to let it happen, though. If we have a land draw for turn, we're just still going to have access to everything.
Yeah, I mean, that's a non-card advantage spell cast by Jake. If you're Sibby and you feel good about your hand, maybe you just kind of let this happen if you feel like you're okay on the board. You don't want to fight there. Take your draw step. You keep that 3 steps ahead in hand, and a lot of options available. So if you're just using tokens to chump block, well, then you've got plenty of turns of that.
Yeah. And I believe Sibby drew an island, which should give us the ability to go play Archangel Elspeth, have 3 steps ahead up. Looks like there's maybe some confusion. Can this maybe not hit planeswalkers? Is it maybe list? I thought it hit non-creature permanent, non-land permanents, pardon me. Looks like everyone's reading this card. Okay, it's not a commonly played card. No, I was kidding.
It's it's right there for everyone to see. One of the best lines in Magic is gift a tapped fish, though. It just is.
Okay, yeah, I was going to say, this is a card that returns any non-land permanent. So correct. I thought so, too. Maybe that's just not an English Into the Flood Maw. We can't really, I at least can't make out the language right here. Oh, the question is number of fish because of Archangel Elspeth.
Oh, that's a good question because of because of the Elspeth passive ability. Yeah, I believe it says if you would create, you create 2 of them. So yeah. I don't know. You probably get 2 of them. Was that
you do? Rule? Yeah, because gifting the fish is part of the alternative casting cost.
It's just the literal wording of gifting it makes it feel like you are making it and giving it to them, right? When in the rules language, that's not actually what's happening. That's very funny. But we've got it settled. We're worked out onto I think our main phase here for Sibby, who's got these tapped fish in case he needs them.
And yeah, I mean, like we talked about before we got into this fish situation, Elspeth can come down, and Elspeth can even tick up now too. I mean, I think I'd probably just 0 because like you keep growing, but you could realistically just, make a bunch of 2/2 flyers, attack with, a couple of them. But yeah, we're just going to keep on +1ing here, make a couple army friends, and then eventually we're going to start zeroing this Elspeth and attacking for a ton. No rush here from Sibby. There's no call. The deck only plays 1 cauldron, typically, sometimes 2 for Jake. No profs either to sort of be that other value engine. Jake's deck really leaning, much like Is It Cauldron on that kind of stuff, just has more ways to facilitate it.
So Sibby, having that much mana, was able to just replay the Elspeth but still keep up the 3 steps ahead. And this is a decision he made. Remember, back on his upkeep, when those fish were gifted to him because it was getting bounced, right? Decided that I can do this and keep it, but maybe I can just also let you burn your card and keep up my counter spell on your turn. So it feels like Jake probably has his back up against the wall here, even though he is, technically ahead on life, but a comfortable 18. But 3 cards in hand is going to have to make the most of them against this very large board of tokens that Sibby has put together. And
it looks like Jake said you. Looks like pointed at Sibby. So
Yeah,
this might be a spot where Jake is hoping that I can just get some crazy race turn. I mean, both these creatures essentially have prowess. The Planisphere gives the creature a counter, so sort of super prowess, if we're being honest.
yeah.
I like this from Sibby.
Just double block. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and Jake levels up to level 3 of this talent. This is a realistic way to win if you hit enough cantrips, make a bunch of autos, but there's so many tokens in play that it is a 2-turn lethal currently. If Elspeth just zeros, you can maybe even activate your Fountain Port in the main phase, depending on what you draw, have a bunch of tokens, and then from there, it's kind of academic. We'll have to see, though.
Not often you get to level 3 on the Storm Chasers talent.
Yeah.
And it's either a very good sign or a very bad sign. And I think in this case, it was a very bad sign for Jake.
Yep. Yeah, if it had been like level up into the Flood Maw your Elspeth, okay. Like that would have been like a pretty good way to start doing this again.
Mm-hmm.
Be in a similar spot, but Sibby would be down mana and maybe we could pop off, do something from there. Overlord of the Mistmoors coming on down. That's going to make some extra moths thanks to Archangel Elspeth as well.
Of course.
Yeah. And yeah, I mean, tough spot for Jake. Not totally unwinnable, depending on what we have in hand, but a very hard spot to be.
These blue-white decks have looked very good against the Izza decks today. Now, obviously, small sample size and full disclosure in our tournament here, a lot of the undefeated decks are, in fact, Izzet. But from what we've seen, the Azorius decks, at least by the players we've had on camera, have been matched up pretty well. But
okay,
here we go. This is a turn for Jake, though. He's got a board that he is untapping with and the ability to start doing things.
So Jake held the end of the Flood Maw last turn, used it at the end of turn to remove a Moth, and looks to be trying to set up, okay, maybe I can hit enough of these bad spot removal spells that are in my deck that I can get across lethal here. It's going to be tough. The Fountain Port is also representing 2 blockers. But, I mean, if Jake's hand, which I haven't been able to make out clearly, is like 2 Torch the Towers, it's not unrealistic.
Well, he decided last turn, right? He very confidently pointed at Sibby and said, these creatures are coming at you, not your Elspeth. So this was the line he committed to, and it's probably a good decision, right? Because you recognize you're probably at this point in the game, 8-9 turns in, not going to outvalue the Azorius control deck. You probably just need to go. You are the beatdown. You need to go find a way towards lethal. That's what Jake is attempting to do.
All right, sleight of hand here. Our stock up got 3 steps ahead. Smart play there from Sibby, sort of just being like, hey, I know raw cards is actually what you need here. So I'll just take care of this 2-for-1 on your end. And yeah, maybe you just kill all these moths, but you probably can't get me with that.
Yeah, that is a heads up play, right? Because a lot of times, and there you go, it works out. Jake scoops up game 1 over to Sibby. But that's a nice point because a lot of times the idea is you counter whatever they go get. You don't the thing getting it because you make them spend more mana when you counter the second thing. But in this case, when it was just simply casting them that mattered, makes a lot of sense. So Sibby heads up play there, takes it down up a game on Jake Conan's Izzet Prowess. We'll take a look at the sideboards here and see what Jake is working with against the blue-white deck. Pretty certain you'll have some removal spells board out if you would like. And you might see some of this just one Rao, the Enduring Curiosity as the other one, an instant speed option.
Yeah, and that card has been a really nice sort of pivot threat card we've seen from a lot of these, even Izzet Cutter, right, before the BNR, as a way to sort of like, hey, against a control deck, I've got this thing that can give me a lot of cards. If I got a lot of things going, but even just, 4/3 flash flyer, flash, if it hits you, draw a card. In combination with all the other stuff is really nice, as you also see out of the Dimir decks, just how, if you draw 1 or 2 cards is often enough to snowball. Spell Piercers look great here. The Disdainful Strokes look great here. The Ral looks always sort of amazing in this deck. It's one of those things I'm always like, dang, Ral is so good when you stick it here. But yeah, I mean, this deck looks to be pretty well tailored for everything. Still no artist talent here. Looks like players this weekend haven't fully bought in yet on talent. Maybe, I'm just in La La Land, but we do have 2 Wild Ride, which is also a card Jake can use to kind of get them when it comes to the blue-white control deck if they tap out at the wrong time. So
that's true. You can actually use Wild Ride for its intended purpose being a combat trick, I guess, or a haste trick, right? As opposed to just sort of the combo-ish piece. That's interesting. So I was thinking about the Rouse, right, and why they are so good, and it's because for all the reasons, you stick a planeswalker against a control deck that wants to grind you out of resources. You have a consistent source of board advantage, all of that, right? But on the other hand, you can flip that around and say, one of the worst possible things I can do against a 3 steps ahead, no more lies deck is to tap out at sorcery speed for a 4-mana card. But the reason it works is because you can just simply overload the control deck's counter spells. And at some point, it's not necessarily about Ral itself. It's about the fact that Ral is the thing that's going to stick after you have forced them to counter 2 or 3 other things, or just simply run them out of it. And that is, I think, like why it's so powerful when you bring in just even 2 cards, right? Because it's not just about the 2 cards you bring in. It's about the slots in your deck total devoted sort of to that effect. And I think that that's just a nice way to look at these sideboards when we're talking about and his prowess against trying to optimize a couple last slots against the blue-white.
Speaking of blue-white, let's check out the blue-white control deck list here as our players are shuffling up. All right, this is our first spotting of Pinnacle Stargate, or Starcade, excuse me, for the weekend here. We've featured blue-white a couple times already, but players have opted just to play a ton of Day of Judgments and an Ultima or 2. Here we have 1 Day of Judgment with 2 Pinnacle Stargates. That's pretty interesting to me. Looking at the sideboard, though, as these players are almost somewhere kind of turbo here, you have cards like Flash Freeze that can hit some of the stuff, but not everything. It's a little awkward. You have these Tide Binders that can hit the Profs and the Agathas that are kind of nice. You can use Rest in Peace to fight over the talent, but basically you're sort of hoping your deck that is sort of built to beat this thing can execute on it. Not a ton that should be swapping over here. Of note, there is a horned lock whale, excuse me, for Sibi over here, which is a nice little way to win the game that we haven't seen too many of the other players playing.
Yeah, that is definitely one of those old school win conditions in the format for these, right? Maybe we can pull that one up on Card Viewer when we get back down to the game, because it is kind of a fun one for sure. But all right, here we go. Off to game 2. Sibi is up 1-0 on Jake. Conan, Azorius Control on your left. Is it Prowess on your right? There you go. Check out that horn-locked whale. It's a combat trick on the front, or a combat removal and trick anyway. And then a flash creature on the back, which is pretty important in a lot of matchups, right? A lot of times you just want your control win condition to have flash so that you can keep up those counter spells at all times and only play the win condition should you need it. So Hornlock Whale, kind of a sweet one.
Yep. Looks like both players spending the first couple turns kind of sculpting their draw. We see some Surveil lands into a sleight of hand, into a pass here for Jake. No Talent would have loved to have gotten a little threat on the board here underneath those counterspells, as Sibi is now representing No More Lies for the remainder of this game. As here comes the Quantum Riddler.
Yeah, I'm not sure if that would put the No More Lies to the test, or you just maybe let that happen on the warp turn and save it for something else. But I'm not sure if Sibi even actually has it. But look at this, though. Yeah. It's not just the warp turn. Is instead, this is the actual plan in Limited, is to give your creatures with warp haste. And that's what happens. Jake uses it to get in there. Great value making use of the cards there. But you can harmonize back to the Wild Ride later. And, of course, being warped, you can get the Quantum Riddler back later as well.
Yeah, I really liked No More Rising that Quantum Riddler. I wonder if that was the only answer Sibi had in hand, because if you had like 2 counters, Quantum Riddler kind of represents like 3 or 4 cards if you count, its body as a value.
Right.
So that's a sign that, maybe Sibi, doesn't have as many answer spells as we would love to have here. The Wild Ride sort of punish is just funny. That's just, good, clean humor where I come from.
That's right. Well, and maybe here we go. The No More Lies does come down to hit the talent. And, look, if you think about how that last game went, you can see a situation where just punching through 7 damage for Jake is pretty huge, because you may need to just kind of poke your way in for the last couple points by the end of it all.
I love this from Jake here. Spell piercing here, it's not clean because you do have this rally you want to protect and the VV you want to protect, but it looks like we don't have the lands to kind of roll that up. Get the Storm Chasers down and get the pressure going. And then now we're putting on that pinch we've been talking about all day. And maybe, Sibi taps out to do something, feels like the pressure, and then you can sneak in one of those other cards.
Well, right. Yeah, because there's 2 ways to protect your Ral and any other big play you want to make, right? One is to wait till you have the land for the Spell Pierce along with it. The other is to simply put enough pressure on the board that Sibby has to spend mana to answer it, unlocking the door for you to resolve that big spell. And perhaps that's what we see here, because Stock Up finds it takes 3 mana during Sibby's main phase here. And then the Seam Rip, while it gets rid of the token, it does in fact clear the way for whatever 4-drop you want to play if you're Jake. Should you have the land? Oh, not quite, but Vivi is obviously still quite powerful. And again, you're demanding mana from Sibby, who going to have to spend some amount of mana answering your board rather than just developing his own. And remember, you punched in for damage with that Wild Ride. He's down to 13. Vivi triggers, if would you get any or more pings towards that life total. So you do see Sibby fire off the Get Lost on the Vivi, and now we'll see if he has any follow-up for himself.
And it looks like another stock up here. Remember, Jake does have Quantum Riddler in the Warp Zone as well.
Yeah, it's been a good game thus far. A lot of back and forth between the players, a lot of decisions being made. Stock Up certainly leads to that, right? I think it's an opportunity it's a card that a lot of people like. It's an opportunity to express skill, as they say. But it really allows you to really make long-term plans, which I think leads to some pretty interesting games as both players kind of jockey for position back and forth.
Yeah, Jake here does have a chance to play Ral, Crackling Wit. The real question is, do you minus or do you plus? I think I like a little plus action here. Maybe your Ral gets Get Losted, but unless your hand's all lands, I like just sort of putting pressure on.
Yeah, that's what this whole game has been for the last like 3 turns, right? It's been Jake putting at least some amount of pressure on and forcing something out of Sibby. Now, here we go. Another tap out play from Sibby is pretty good. Is bouncing both parts of that Ral back to hand and adding a body to the board. No 5th land for Jake either. So a little constrained. All of a sudden, just tapping out for Ral looks a little worse. Big play there from Sibby to tap out for 6 mana and just kind of try to swing the door shut in this case.
Yeah, and we talked about Meringue and some of the other rounds too, about how this is your card advantage spell. Then the late game is a pretty good way just to win.
All right, so it's a warp here from Jake.
Looks like we have an opt-in hand and a Spell Pierce. Looks like we're going to crack a map looking for some lands. We'd love to get one. There we go.
Nice find for Jake.
Yeah, basically draw a card there. We're missing a land drop for turn 2, so it's not even the awkward, like, oh, I'm happy to get a land. All right. We hit the Planisphere. Very interesting spot here on if you actually want to do anything. So it looks like we had the other Wild Ride.
I love it. Do you want to trade?
Yeah, it's interesting too because the Quantum Riddler will come back, right?
Yeah.
So getting it now does mean you're denying Jake a card. On the other hand, you have Meringue River Regent with Elspeth Archangel in hand. Things aren't
on the other hand, you're at 13 life.
Yeah.
You'd be down to quite a low amount, and then all it takes is some stray Vivis or Otters to end it. So you actually see
it's a chump block, by the way.
It's a chump block. That's right.
Yeah.
It's not a trade because it's now put over into the exile zone and can in fact be replayed. Well, I guess you're seeing why Quantum Riddler has become commonplace in a lot of these lists. It wasn't in the first couple iterations of this deck, but it has increasingly more so become that piece.
Yeah, and it's just, a nice to have like a little cantripping body too, right? Like the wild ride stuff is just sort of gravy, you know. Um, let's see here what Jake can do though. As Archangel Elspeth has come down, this has been the timer moment for everyone this weekend in our feature match area. This card comes down, you have to answer it post haste. As here comes a Ral with Spell Pierce backup.
Are we sure? So Chad is asking, I do want to check here. The Riddler is a 6 toughness. The Meringue is a 6 power.
Yes, but how maps work is they put +1/+1 counters on things, chat.
There you go.
So chat, so you see if you add 1 to 7 or 6, it equals 7. Then 7 is 8, and then 8, 9. Oh no. As we are going to see the Ral go back to hand, this Brine River region does not care about Spell Pierce. You see Jake, a little shake of the head there. But yeah, we used map 1, hit Mountain, map 2, hit Planisphere. We bend the Planisphere.
It's not often that those map tokens from Get Lost are game deciders, but in this case, it may well have been important. That said, what a swing back here from Sibby.
I do think Jake forgot to draw a card off the op. Maybe he did it very quickly. I think he just did the classic bottom and then draw for turn / opt. You can't miss the opt.
All right, here we go. Vivi, starting with sleight of hand. So 1 trigger, 1 ping. You're going to need to get something. I mean, Elspeth up to 7 counters. There's a lot of tokens. It's just a scary board from the Azorius side. And while I think Jake was very correct to take all the aggro lines he did with the wild rides and things, because you can see why dragging it out against blue-white is so dangerous. But all right, another sleight of hand, another trigger, another ping, down to 11 life is Sibby.
As we are going to try to figure out how to win from here, but there's a lot of pressure on board. I mean, 15 damage if we 0 the Elspeth. If we have another Elspeth, that's game. That the secret second Elspeth to Anthem again is always so frustrating.
Yeah.
It's so funny too. Looks like we are going to use the VV mana now. Cast into the Flood Maw.
All right. That'll bounce the Elspeth. The fish have been gifted.
Yep, and as we learned again, number 1, Elspeth is in play when the fish is gifted, so another one gets made. Pretty huge here for Sibby.
Yeah, it's a lot of tokens, and I mean, Sibby is down to 6 life. Jake is at 18, pretty healthy. All right, Sibby's going to have to do something to answer.
Sibby has lethal.
Vivi, right, and then to clean it up, yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, Jake has to have an answer to one of these fish / soldiers / dragons, because if you 0 here, everyone gets a counter.
Yep.
And flying, and that's lethal. Yeah, you see Sibby sort of double checking. I'm assuming we said 0 here, and we just haven't pulled out the dice. But maybe we missed it. Who knows? Yeah,
there we go. Counts it up, verifies that it's lethal. That's game. Going over to Sibby and match 2-0. Azorius control over is at prowess. We do have some backup magic for you, though. But Azorius control taking it down yet again, and a very clean Elspeth victory, as a lot of them have been.
Yep, and it looks like kind of so far what we have here is the VV decks and the Azorius control decks, when we look through our standings, are the ones really standing out so far. Now, it is only round 4, and lots of other decks can still top 8. But I think what it's kind of showing so far is like, okay, a lot of the VV decks are beating, decks that maybe have some plans but aren't committed. And now they're running into the decks that are like, okay, I've come to beat you. Let's see what you can do here. And Will here on your left, one of our staple players here on the NRG series at 3-0 is just playing VV Prowess instead of Cauldron, which is telling. We're seeing more and more of this. I wonder how much of this is like strong preference towards prowess over Cauldron in the abstract, or like Grayson said, that inconsistency and kind of stumbling of Cauldron was maybe a little frustrating, and we didn't want to pull the trigger for it.
I think that as the free wins dried up with the Cauldron lists and the format, it simply is going to make more sense probably to play the less all-in versions in the future, right? That makes sense to me. And the prowess decks kind of skirt the line, right? While also probably being able to speed up a little against decks that have one or two pieces of interaction, but you need to interact as well. So I don't know. I do think that's probably the way of the future. That said, we'll have the spotlight next week. We'll get some more insight into this, but at least for this tournament, seems to be what we're looking at so far. And we're going to have another good test here as we get started on prowess versus Azorius control again.
Yeah, there are some weird incentives we don't talk a lot about, especially near the end of the year. For some of our leaderboard players, we talk about champs, there's tens of thousands of dollars on the lines for champs. And if you're close, having just like a pretty good weekend is all you need, right? Like if you top 16 every event and sneak a top 8, you're probably there if you're like Will in this position, right? So there are some weird incentives. So I don't think that's exactly happening here for our players. That is definitely something I've seen, like, at the last event where it's like, yeah, maybe this deck's broken, but I know my other deck is pretty good. Looks like this is actually the Cauldron build here for Will. As we see, Mariko and FOMO, we've been tricked by production. Production, the secret is marauding Mako and Steam Core Scholar. Don't let them get you. The kids are trying to trick us out here. They love to name their decks wrong on the websites. Here, Corbin, I'll say what we were joking about before, and I thought about tweeting, which is if you want a feature match, label your deck correctly. Because if you label your deck incorrectly, I will get eerily frustrated and be like, oh, this kid out here thinks they're funny.
Yeah, and there's like the only people who will see your joke are the people who will be mad about it, and it's like us. Don't do it.
Yeah.
No, it's just helpful, right? For everybody. But also that said, we do like fun deck names, okay? When we can get them. I like fun deck names within reason as somebody who's been responsible for deck names for many years at this point.
Yeah.
There are some fun ones allowed. And these, in this case, maybe nothing too fun about naming an Azorius control deck. But I do think quite a few players enjoy playing an Azorius control deck.
Yep, and here comes the Prof's deck memory after the Winter Night stories. We're going to get lost the FOMO. Looks like we were very close to Delirium before, and now even more so with that enchantment in the graveyard. As here's Overlord of the Mistmoors coming down, and this is a card we've heard some of the Azorius control players sort of be like, it's here for Dimir, but it gets the job done sometimes.
Yeah, this is something we're not seeing much today. Is the fast Overlord from Blue White. So this is a different line as well. Kowalsk's going to pitch in a braid that you don't expect to do too much.
I like this here. Taking a moment, think about what exactly I can hit. Maybe use this mana for some other things. Hits the Spire Bluff Canal. Oh, there's a Draconaut. Put that in the graveyard, enabling some combo shenanigans later. Maps are, people get frustrated about Get Lost helping the opponent out. It's extra frustrating against the VV Cauldron deck when you give your opponent a counter on their creature.
Right.
And it's just like, oh, okay. So now it has all those abilities. Cool.
All right. Well, if you're Austin, you've got up to 6 mana now. And you just say go, I guess, because, hey, keep the tokens back on defense. Just take the Overlord down. It gives you something to basically play towards as a blue-white deck, right? If you're able to suspend, if you're able to impinge your Overlord, make the tokens, well, now you're just playing to where you can unlock it again, especially when we're talking Overlord of the Mistmoors here and the blockers it's able to make. So I like the line you're on here for Austin. That said, this is a must answer. Agatha's Soul Cauldron coming down for Will, and that immediately prompts the catch and coil. So we're going
the
to try to find
problem-
an answer.
Yeah, I don't know if there is an answer, right? What like you would have to be negate because you're on 2 mana with 4 mana up from Will. Will's
Yeah.
sort of making the land drops every turn here. I'm not sure how long we've had this Agatha's, but played really well around both No More Lies and the ability to like tutor up an answer here. So we are going to see if you're missing out hit the battlefield now. Discard a beautiful mountain. I'm going to see Will track the Prof trigger using a dice on the Prof, and we'll move that over to some other creature when the time comes.
All right, so Agatha's Soul Cauldron has resolved. The creatures he has access to in the graveyard right now is irrelevant because now there's been a Vivi added. So we might be looking at that one instead.
Yeah, and now this is going to be a potentially really big turn. There is a Winter Night Stories in the yard as well. So we can use Agatha's and take a VV, put the VV on something. You can Prof away as well. You might just want to... I mean, there's a couple ways to do it. I think this makes a good amount of sense. Yeah, take the Draconaut Engineer, because you can't really do too much except Winter Knights.
Right.
But now you kind of have all these creatures that are Dragonauts. And
yeah, if we can get the Draconaut popped up. This has been one of the cards that's not universal across these Cauldron lists. Because it can, in the mirror, sometimes be a liability. However, when it is in your graveyard and you have a Cauldron going, like, for instance, against a blue-white deck with no graveyard hate, it enables your big turn to also include haste. And that is a big, big game for the deck.
Yeah, and so now, you see the exerted ability. It got the extra counter, and then Fear of Missing Out creates an extra combat step. That extra combat step means we get to use our Profs again, which means the Fear of Missing Out will grow again. And then we can use the Fear of Missing Out again to then attack again, right? Loses Vigilance, which means Will has just won the game, unless there was some way to interact kind of at the beginning of all this. There has not been so far. So, untap here. Jump block this Steam Core Scholar again. But we get a our fourth combat step this turn, thanks to Fear of Missing Out's interaction to Profs. And Austin's dead. And this is why you have to be careful about so many different things in the VV Prowess list.
That's right.
Because, the VV Cauldron list, misspoke there, because it can kill out of nowhere here. So we're not going to have time for sideboarding. We're kind of catching up to the round. The players are playing quickly today. So we're going to jump straight into game number 2 here and try and get the rest of this feature match in for you all before our round 5 starts.
That was the Cauldron deck right there.
Yep.
We got to see it all go the way it was supposed to go for basically the first time today. And it did it for Will Kowalczyk at 3-0 here at our standard 10K in Lansing, up a game against Austin Graham on Azorius Control, who will, though, be on the play this time around.
All right, there's the Surveilling. Let's see here. As a Fear of Missing Out, it hits the yard. Starting town on turn 3. Last chance for that one to be ETB untapped. And a passing of the turn.
All right. This is a bit of a staring contest thus far. We'll see if the fireworks get going here. 1 mana for a Mako. Nod of the head from Graham. Okay.
I like this a lot from Will on turn 3, just skipping. We probably had all these cards too, but Austin is representing 3 steps ahead, no more lies, and that's it. So force Austin to just on turn 4, when you want to catch Coil or something like that, to, or consult the star charts here. Maybe you have to counter one of these cards, and you don't get to do this, or you are going to consult the star charts and I just get you. And speaking of get you, here comes Spell Pierce, countering that consult the star charts, that big refuel card.
That's right. And it's a great point too, because it's not a staring contest because both players have nothing. It was a staring contest because specifically Will Kowalczyk was setting up that turn where you were able to threat, answer, right? Like creature, profs, spell pierce, big turn. And while the Mako is gone, the profs is here for the long term, and it can help with anything that follows, like for instance, the Steam Core Scholar that has resolved.
Yep. And now we're going to draw 2, discard 1 if we meet the right conditions, 2 if we don't. Either way, that profs is going to be representing 2 counters on this Steam Core Scholar. Austin has a demolition field, excuse me. Ooh, Wild Ride hits the graveyard. Important to note that because of the Soul Sun Sanctuary, that's a typically hard to answer threat, but Demolition Field can blow it up there. Austin doesn't want to tap out to answer that now, too afraid of maybe something punishing. And here comes Exercise. Austin maybe also just wants Will to commit the mana before using it. Negate here, negate back. All right. A lot of fighting going on this turn. Austin left with 2 cards. And we see the difference, too, between these decks when they can slam Elspeth, right, and not. That's been the difference between Austin and every other blue-white control game we watched today. Austin has not been able to sort of slam and protect an Elspeth. We've just been about other cards, which have just been way less impressive in comparison. Now, Will's also been playing VV Cauldron here and not drawing 10 lands in a row. So that's going to help a little bit with the whole equation as well.
Well, yeah, and Will, we can trace a lot of what just happened too back to that turn 2 or 3 when Will decided not to play those cards and save them for a big turn, and then as a result was able to resolve a Prof's Eidetic Memory, and then the Eidetic Memory has turned any one creature into a big threat, and that's why you then see a fight happen over a Steam Core Scholar, which would otherwise, not necessarily be something you have to talk about immediately. So. Really nicely set up here by Will to get into this position. And looks like, at least for now, is paying it off. You're going to need some kind of board wipe out of Austin Graham's deck.
Okay, interesting. Austin had the Get Lost, but fought over the Tursa instead of the Profs. Now, Will does get to go land for turn here, thanks to the Tursa. Meringue River Region on top of the deck. Austin here now facing down this Prof's Fear of Missing Out combination we saw in game number 1. I'm curious if we'll actually search here. All right, we do decide to search and get a land. And don't forget, Will does have Wild Ride in the graveyard, which means this Fear of Missing Out is representing 12 damage currently.
Yeah, that's a very good point, right? Because the combo finish is not always a Vivi combo finish. Sometimes it can be attack steps and just pumps. So a lot to consider here. We talked about all the mini sort of packages this deck has, and then of course sometimes it just ties it all together with a Vivi, just like that in a Winter Night Stories.
Yep. Austin takes 1 down to 19. This Winter Night Stories draws 3 cards, going to discard some. Fear of Missing Out is looking to gain a ton of power this turn, as Profs is going to give it 3+1/+1 counters. We do have 1 mana available here for Will. I was going to say, I don't know if he has a play he wants to make with it, maybe pop a map or something like that. But we're going to attack here, 4/6, untap our Fear of Missing Out, gain another counters attack again. Bam, 9. That's 15.
What a piece of deck building this all of these pieces come together to be in the Vivi decks. These as the decks are very, very well designed, especially for this early in a format. And Austin Graham just says nothing you can do about it. Extends the hand. That's game over to Will Kowalczyk. The victory 4-0 here at the NRG series in Lansing.
Yep, and with a 7-round event, it's looking very close, like a top 8 finish again here for Will. Something very used to. But we're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with round number 5 in just a minute as time has been called, and we'll see you all in just a few minutes.